The day after the latest attack of pure evil.
Charlie Kirk murdered at a university in Utah.
This is a political assassination.
Bill O'Reilly taking on history's monsters. The men who lusted for power. Lives to him were meaningless.
They were just numbers.
For money.
J.P. Morgan. He's doing all this, and he knows he's doing it.
And for sex.
Personal evil is rampant in this world.
Who inspired America's current enemies? Foreign.
Hitler's legacy lives in the Middle East.
And domestic.
The left doesn't want to punish criminals. That alone is evil.
Bill O'Reilly is pulling no punches.
I can't go to Moscow now after writing this book.
Bill O'Reilly, Confronting Evil. Good evening, I'm Leland Vittert. The word evil elicits a visceral response from us normal, kind human beings, and with good reason. Evil is something we often look away from, something we are scared of. But that's the very reason Bill O'Reilly just wrote a book about confronting evil. In it, he delves deep into the lives of history's most vile men. Bill sat down with us to talk not only about the horrors they committed in the past, but how they continue to shape our world today. All right, O'Reilly, we'll start with two words, confronting evil. Define evil for me.
My definition of evil is if one human being hurts another human being on purpose, knows that they are delivering a destructive blow to a person, and does it anyway, that's evil.
How are we confronting these people that the world already knows so much about and universally agree were evil?
But they don't know so much about them. We're confronting them by exposing them. I tell you why they did, what they did, why they did it, and how they accomplished it. I'm not a shrink, but based upon 50 years of reporting, I've seen pretty much every evil you could possibly see.
But now the government soldiers have driven the rebels out of town and into the mountains.
And it always stayed with me, and I always wanted to write about it someday.
Why do we need this book, Bill?
You know, we live in an age that's complicated, and we have nuclear weapons, and the earth could be obliterated by evil. The destruction capacity is there. So you need to know, if you are a human being that wants a good society, a good life, that there are people who take it away from you. He's absolutely there.
Right on the top of that list and right on the cover of the book is the current Russian President Vladimir Putin. His reputation for corruption, assassination, and warmongering is well earned. What's worse, O'Reilly says he is only getting bolder. 20 pages in Confronting Evil to Vladimir Putin. By far the biggest chapter.
Right.
Why?
He's a danger to us. Enjoys inflicting suffering on people. He's a mass murderer. Gets away with everything, and we document that. I mean, he's blowing people out of the sky, and he's poisoning people in London. And I mean, this is a guy who's totally out of control. No constraints on him at all.
You open the chapter on Vladimir Putin with him as a KGB man.
Right. The Soviet Union dissolved. He was furious. He was running the KGB office in Dresden. And he went out, confronted a crowd by himself with a handgun.
He stood him down.
And the crowd dispersed.
Yeah, Putin stared the crowd down with only a handgun. There's something behind those eyes that have always been there, right?
That's what evil does. People can sense evil. Then we go into his child, who perfectly explains why he's a psychopath, sociopath, narcissist. So Putin has two brothers, both died. And his father works a night shift and beats the hell out of Vlad and is often drunk on vodka. So Vlad basically splits when he's about 12 years old. And he goes into a gang. And then Vlad graduates, naturally, into the totalitarian Soviet system, where you beat up people that don't agree with you or kill them.
Всегда помнить о тех, кто создал российское государство, отстаивал его достоинство, делало его великим, мощным, могучим государством.
Putin right now is the richest man on the planet. The irony is he can't spend the money. He's been designated a war criminal. He cannot spend the money that he has extorted from the Russian economy.
There's a famous moment with you confronting Donald Trump about Vladimir Putin.
Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very
He's a
possible
killer,
I
though.
won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
I warned him.
He dismissed it, though.
He did.
Why?
Because he wanted to believe. People believe what they want to believe, Lee.
Yeah.
And he wanted to believe that he could deal with Putin.
Is Trump changed since that interview?
Definitely. Because Putin has disrespected Trump in Trump's mind. Now, when they talk on the phone, Putin is exceedingly polite, even deferential.
Old KGB training, manipulation.
Whatever you want, Donald.
He's great, I'm all in on negotiations. Right. And then that night he's launching attacks on Ukrainian hospitals.
Right. That's who Putin is.
It's been well established that confronting Vladimir Putin can be bad for your health, right?
You'll die.
Russian activist and Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has died.
So Putin's enemies, businessmen, journalists, dissidents, defectors, all end up dead publicly. Why does Vladimir Putin do these things so publicly on the world stage?
Sends a message that he's above all law, he's above America, he's above everybody. He can do what he wants, and he will.
Повторю. Испытания в боевых условиях ракетной системы «Орешник» проводятся нами в ответ на агрессивные действия стран НАТО в отношении России.
Look, here's how bad it is. Confronting Evil, I can't go to Moscow now after writing this book.
You worried?
No. If it happens, it happens.
But according to O'Reilly, there would be no Putin without his predecessor and role model, Joseph Stalin, who receives and richly deserves his own chapter in Confronting Evil.
Putin idolizes to this day Joseph Stalin.
Joseph Stalin completed the Russian Revolution's descent from its utopian ideals into a totalitarian communist dictatorship. Stalin's collectivist economic plans yielded widespread famine. His purges and gulag prisons liquidated millions of his own countrymen. He initially allied with Hitler, only to be blindsided when the Blitzkrieg raged across his borders. Russia might well have been defeated in World War II, but Stalin threw limitless lives into the Battle of Stalingrad.
The orders were, in writing, if any Russian retreats, they're to be shot.
And Stalin, at that point, didn't care about the losses.
He never cared about the losses, ever.
Lives to him were meaningless.
They were just numbers. He couldn't care less how many people died, even his own people. He was killing his own people.
Millions of his own people.
Yeah, starving them, relocating them. Anything to protect the state.
75 years later, Vladimir Putin would employ the same meat grinder strategy in Ukraine. You go back to Stalin's childhood. You write about him getting beaten up by a drunk father, trying to shield his mother, living in abject poverty.
Well, Putin and Stalin had almost the exact same upbringing. Okay? So if you want to understand what Putin does, what he does, you got to know Stalin.
You think about neo-Marxists, neo-socialists, whatever you want to call them. They say, but for Stalin, communism, socialism would work. It's not a failed system. It's just that Stalin went a little too far.
Oh, yeah. There has never been on this planet a socialist or communist government that has succeeded in the long
We keep trying it.
term.
Americans have seen what happens with socialism, with communism. People...
No, they haven't. You go into any public high school and you ask these urchins about communism, socialism, you don't know what you're talking about. The older
Is that a problem?
People, oh, huge.
Is that why Memdami? Is that why Memdami?
Bernie Sanders is a communist. He's not a socialist. He's a communist. If you trace him back, he honeymooned in Moscow. Do you know anybody else has done that? Okay?
No,
Okay.
not exactly a tourist destination.
And so if you don't understand the viciousness of the communist system, which is you have no rights, we'll seize all your property, and if we want to kill you, we'll kill you. That's what communism is. And you go into high school, and they don't
Free
know.
buses.
They don't know.
State-run grocery stores. Sounds pretty good. You note that Stalin, among the group of evildoers, was not particularly brilliant. He wasn't particularly charismatic. He wasn't some great economic mind. How was he able to do it?
Brute. He's a brute.
You brutalize a population, you kill tens of millions of people as Stalin did, and at the end, millions come to Moscow. You end the chapter with 40 people crushed to death trying to see the casket.
Right, the casket.
So explain how someone does that to a society, and yet they spend their last rubles to come to Moscow and see the casket.
Most people in these totalitarian countries are ignorant. They just don't know. If you go to a vibrant country, a democracy, people, free press, right? You can watch NewsNation and get some info. There's no NewsNation in Russia now. There's no NewsNation. Or under Stalin, no free press, no free flow of information. How are they going to know?
What is it about Stalin that Putin admires?
Power. Absolute power.
And that's what Putin wants.
Well, he has it in Russia.
Разумеется, выбирая в случае необходимости и в качестве ответных мер объекты для поражения такими системами, как Орешник, на территории Украины.
Coming up, you knew this guy was going to get some attention.
He was crazy the whole way through. But at the end, he's a raving lunatic.
Bill O'Reilly confronts Adolf Hitler, the people who put him in power, and the man he believes is keeping Hitler's legacy alive today. It may not be who you think. And later, which Americans made Bill's Hall of Shame? Nathan Bedford Forrest?
Oh.
Stay with us. It should surprise no one that Adolf Hitler made the cover of the book. After all, he brought Germany under Nazi rule, started World War II, and ordered millions killed in the Holocaust. None of Hitler's other evil acts can match the scale of those atrocities. But O'Reilly chose to paint a more personal portrait.
I open the Hitler chapter with the Night of the Long Knives, where Hitler turns on his best friends, kills them. His best friends, the guys who got him the power through intimidation, violence, the so-called brown shirts. He's there on the scene, Hitler. He walks into the lobby and makes sure everybody is neutralized, including his best friend, Ernst Röhm. Okay? Hitler enjoys this. That is the absolute truth, and that is the essence of evil.
One of the most interesting parts of Hitler's rise to power, and you write about this, is that he told the German people, this is what I want to do, and then did it. He was elected. What does that say?
He wrote a book, Mein Kampf. They put him in jail in the 1920s because he was such a threat. From the very beginning, he didn't try to disguise his evil. He didn't try to disguise it.
What does it say that he was then elected to commit
It
evil?
says the German people are partially responsible for that whole thing over there. That's what it says. Now, the Nazis never got a majority vote, but they were high enough to win power. So Hitler, look, you got a guy here who was very brave, and we write about that. In World War I, he won the Iron Cross as a corporal. I mean, the guy was not some wallflower bureaucrat, okay? He was robust in his evil. And then he took advantage of, number one, the treaty where the Germans lost in World War I that devastated German society, and then the Great Depression where people didn't have anything to eat.
Okay, so harsh conditions breed evil.
Always. Always. That is the stair step that all of these maniacs took to gain power. It wasn't hard for Hitler to amass 40% of the German people voting for him. All he said was, hey, we're getting hosed. We're the master race. We're better than everybody else. You may not have anything now, but if you vote for me, we're going to right all the wrongs. And the people persecuting you, who own the banks and the buildings, the Jews, we'll get them. We're going to get them. 40% of the Germans go, okay. That happened. It's not complicated and convoluted.
You write, Adolf Hitler is thoroughly addicted to narcotics.
Right.
He is given daily doses of hormones, stimulants, methamphetamines, and opioids. He needs barbiturates to sleep. Minutes after the initial injection, the dictator slumbers in his simple twin bed. At his feet is his favorite companion, a 4-year-old German shepherd named Blondie.
He was crazy the whole way through. But at the end, he was a raving lunatic. And Hitler lived in a surreal world, not a real world. He's a drug addict. He was so megalomaniacal that you couldn't even say to him, hey, Fuhrer, we just lost on the beaches of Normandy. You couldn't say that to him. But they all have one thing in common. They live in a bubble. And nobody can penetrate the bubble while they're in power because they'll kill them. And if they want to take narcotics, as Hitler did, there's a guy there to inject them every hour on the hour if that's what the Fuhrer wants.
Nazis are seen as the most evil by Americans that have ever existed. But people compare Trump to Hitler. ICE agents are the Gestapo or stormtroopers.
Sure.
What's the danger in that?
It diminishes true evil into a triviality. So if you're going to say that the United States of America, by rounding up illegal migrants, is at the same level of a guy who ordered people put into ovens, including babies and women, then you're an idiot. And you're diminishing the poor souls who had to go through that during World War II.
Of course, anti-Semitism persists to this day in many groups and forms. But O'Reilly says Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini was Hitler's most effective heir and dedicates a chapter to the Ayatollah's malevolent vision. Khomeini came to power leading the Iranian Revolution of 1979. He brought and enforced an era of religious zealotry, politically motivated murders, and international terror that continues to menace all of us today. You've got bin Laden, you've got Sinwar, who led Hamas in the October 7th attacks, Baghdadi of ISIS. Why pick the Ayatollah?
Because he was the guy that put into motion all of these other guys. So once you have a head of state that says every Jew on the planet should be killed, then you start to go, okay.
The Ayatollah often said that he was the one confronting evil. He was confronting the United States that he viewed as evil.
Correct. So the Ayatollah got into power because the Shah was so bad. The Shah just exploited the hell out of the country, and then the Persian economy went down. And then Khomeini in Paris, exiled, said, oh, I got a opportunity here. We'll do it in the mosques. We'll get all the imams on board.
The departure of the Shah is not the final victory, but it is the preface to our victory.
And that's what happened. So it's the same thing in almost every society. The strong men evildoers replace the corrupt weak rulers.
You talk about the October 7th attacks. You detail them in the book, carried out by Hamas. Does that all roads lead back to Iran?
All. See, these outfits couldn't exist without Iran's weapons and money. So ISIS, Hamas, the Revolutionary Guard, the real fanatics. They want to kill every Jew. Every Jew. Kill them all. That's from the Third Reich. So Hitler's legacy lives in the Middle East. And that is obviously a threat to the world.
I think the Ayatollah would be quite pleased, wouldn't he?
Yeah, he's probably in a hot place right now.
Do you really believe that? Do you believe that there's
I hope so. You know, people ask me all the time. I just hope so. I hope there's a final judgment on these evil people.
Coming up, who's the most evil of them all? For Bill O'Reilly, it's the man behind America's biggest threat today, confronting China's Chairman Mao.
Mao Zedong was the worst human being who ever lived.
That's next. Today's communist China is both America's most vital trading partner and its biggest global rival.
A single shipyard in China now produces more ships every year than all of the American shipyards combined.
For that, we can thank a charismatic and ruthless revolutionary named Mao Zedong.
In my opinion, Mao Zedong was the worst human being ever to live.
Rising from the rubble of the brutal Japanese occupation during World War II, Mao's communist revolution toppled the corrupt nationalist regime of Chiang Kai-shek. Once in power, Chairman Mao pursued his vision for a communist utopia. And what a vision it was. He began with a totalitarian police state that abolished individual rights. Then came his great leap forward. But instead, the collectivist economic program brought widespread famine and the deaths of millions.
Not only did he kill tens of millions of his own people, he starved them to death on purpose because they wouldn't conform to his insane view of how to run the economy. Starved them to death. Didn't care one whit about his own people. Never cared. It was the same old thing. Everything's the state. If we tell you that you have to live on 800 calories a day, you have to live on 800 calories a day. Because we're taking the food. His army got the food. Okay? And the little children starve to death. I think that's pretty evil.
Later, Mao would build a cult of personality around himself and turned on his comrades. His cultural revolution mobilized youth into Red Guards that purged society of alleged capitalist elements. And then there's the Cultural Revolution.
Well, the Cultural Revolution, it was just Sol's little stupid red book. I mean, communism comes down a very simple doctrine. It's like fascism. It's you can't do anything. That's it. Communism, you have no rights. You can't own property. You have to live where we tell you to live.
How did Mao make this appealing to people? How is it that Mao gets so many people to fight, to die, to kill their fellow countrymen for this communism idea that you laid out that is antithetical to the human equation?
Because he would lie to them. He'd say, oh, we're all going to have the same. We'll have a nice house, we'll have a nice garden, we'll have everything you want. And that's what all communists do. And of course, it never works out. Everything's going to be better here. And the Chinese people are suffering. They don't have anything. Chiang Kai-shek is corrupt. They hate him. They hate the Japanese. The Japanese had come in and slaughtered them. And Mao goes, I hate Japanese. I'm going to take care of Japanese. And everybody goes, yay, we like you. It's very simple, not complicated.
Long live Chairman Mao. Long live Chairman Mao.
Do we pay enough attention to what Mao did, what Mao created, what Xi is continuing?
Well, look, China is a country that could go either way. It could become a existential enemy. That means that we'd have to deal with them, maybe militarily. That would be the most catastrophic event in human history. Or we can come to some kind of an arrangement. So when I was in China, I spoke to the Chinese Politburo in May of this year. The guys that brought me in, and I paid my own way, I don't do that. I asked them, because they're very wealthy people. there are wealthy people in China. So how does being a billionaire square with communism? And he looked at me and he said, there is no other way to govern 1.5 billion people. No other way. It has to be this way.
Next door, India's got democracy.
That's what this man was saying. They believe or talk themselves into it or whatever, that the system they have imposed, the most hellacious police state on this earth, has to be, because you couldn't control all these people.
So you don't think the world is going to look back on us 80 years from now and say America for 40 years did not confront China? Going back to H.W. Bush would not confront China because we didn't want to pay the economic cost.
No, you didn't want to start World War III because you can't use military because of the nuclear weapons.
Coming up, the British royals, evil? We're winding back the centuries to confront one king of England, often celebrated in popular culture, but not by Bill O'Reilly.
He was so cruel personally, it was staggering.
The next evildoer on Bill O'Reilly's list isn't a 20th century tyrant, but the consequences of his actions are still felt today. King Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church so he could divorce the first of his 6 wives. He beheaded 2 of them while betraying his closest friends and advisors in a reign that would change both England and the world forever.
I wanted to get a chapter in the book that shows you how evil people can be to their wives, to their best friends, to their children, personal evil. And that's why I put him in there, because personal evil is rampant in this world.
He sort of feels like small potatoes.
Right, but he isn't. Because how he treated his wives and his best friend, Thomas More.
What was so important about the story of Thomas More?
Well, More is his best friend. You know, he wanted to help the peasants. He's a confidant of Henry VIII. Henry, in the beginning, respects him. And then he told Henry, look, you can't be disrespecting the Pope. We're all Catholic here. And Henry goes, blank you, I'm going to do whatever I want. And you're going to tell everybody. And Thomas More goes, I can't do that. And he goes, okay, say hello to the Tower of London. And then he winds up with his head cut off. It's personal, you know. That'd be like, 3 weeks, Leland, you and I, we meet and then I have my guys cut your head off.
You've considered it.
No, Cuomo, yeah, but not you. And he extended that to everybody in England, Scotland, and Ireland, and he created the Protestant Catholic Wars that ravaged Europe and killed millions of people over the centuries. It was all Henry VIII.
All because he wanted a divorce.
He wanted what he wanted when he wanted it. That was it. And if you didn't show up with it, hello, Tower of London.
It brings up an interesting point, though. Has there ever been anybody who had absolute power, as Genghis Khan, as Stalin, as Hitler, as Henry VIII did, and then not been corrupted, not become gluttonous and pathological?
Constantine, ruler of the Holy Roman Emperor. He was a fairly good guy. George Washington could have been king. They wanted to crown him. So there have been people throughout history that have not succumbed to the evil that often accompanies power.
But it's the exception rather than the rule.
I mean, this guy, he was a great illustration of that. Evil destroys human beings. If you are an evil person, you are going to destroy yourself.
Yeah, but Henry VIII gets this pass in popular culture, right? He's the only one of these guys.
Pass, I know.
Why?
I don't know. I got Episcopalian friends, and I go, does it ever strike you that the guy that's in charge is Henry VIII?
Yeah, but Henry VIII is celebrated beyond the Anglican Church, right? There's movies, there's pop culture.
Look, you're right. The British people, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but the British subjects, they don't want to admit a lot of wrongdoing.
Is this an Irishman talking, Bill?
Yeah, a little bit. They confiscated my family's land for no reason, causing very, very severe pain. But I wanted to show the complete disregard that these people had on a personal level. I mean, you know, they're eating, they're drinking, they got 18 mistresses, someone taking narcotics, on and on and on and on. And I'm going to do what I want.
Coming up, who were the most evil Americans? You may never have heard their names, but you need to know what they did.
The slave industry was the worst thing that ever happened in the United States.
Bill O'Reilly confronting our homegrown evil. Next. You write that we Americans have vanquished evil governments in Germany, Japan, Russia, Iraq, and other far-off places. But you feature examples of evil in the United States. You profile the African slave traders, Isaac Franklin, John Armfield.
Ugh.
At one point, the richest guys in America.
In the world.
And we allowed it.
In the world.
But the American government, the American people
they allowed it. And it was a slave trade, okay, that went from Virginia down to New Orleans and then back up the Mississippi. So yes, the slave industry was the worst thing that ever happened in the United States.
The stats you write in the book are stunning. The New Orleans slave market was the largest in the world. I think this is a pretty stunning passage. It was searing when I read it. 1,000 slaves wait to be sold. The slaves are separated by gender and age. One by one, they climb atop a wooden box as buyers inspect them. Males are prodded, slapped, and then forced to jog across a gravel pit without shoes. Females are subjected to demeaning examinations to prove their fertility. Children watch in horror as their parents are sold to the highest bidder. More cargo arrives tomorrow. Slavery was at the very heart of the American economy. That's why it was so important to the South. That's the thesis of the 1619 Project.
Right.
Are you on the same side as them?
No.
Okay.
Because slavery was exclusively for the benefit of the aristocracy in the South. And the reason it wasn't outlawed was because the South would secede. And everybody knew that. These kooks that want to denigrate America, they're basically saying, okay, slavery built the country. That's not true. All right, that's not even close to being true. What is true is the legacy of slavery harms African Americans to this day. That is true. And I think we have tried now to rectify that mistake. My belief is we have tried to right the historical wrongs.
The Civil War was fought to protect slavery, yet
Right.
the statues to Confederate generals still stand. A big part of traditional values, Americans, whatever you want to call them, MAGA, we're going to bring the statues back. Bases named after Confederate generals. How do you square that?
I swear it like I want those names out there. I want people to see who these men were, because they're all different.
There's a difference in having the name out there than celebrating it, right? We wouldn't have
about celebrating.
Would we ever have Fort Forrest after Nathan Bedford Forrest?
So one of the worst people who ever lived in America was Nathan Bedford Forrest. We got a chapter on him, Confederate general, and he was the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. As evil as they come. Now, there's no justification for having a statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest. Robert E. Lee, a different story, okay? I'm not justifying what Lee did, but Lee believed that states' rights and his Virginia shouldn't be told what to do from the people across the river. And it wasn't that Lee was a slaver, enthusiastic, but he decided to do what he did. He was wrong.
But that's different.
Was he evil? No, in my opinion.
Slavery, unquestionably a force for bad in America. Lots of awful things came from it. American capitalism has been the single greatest thing to happen to the world and the advances because of it. And yet you put the robber barons next to the African slavers as American evil?
Sure. And this is fascinating. So we're taping this interview right down the street from where J.P. Morgan lived.
Yeah.
J.P. Morgan, the shrewdest, the smartest robber baron, bought up all these companies, paid his people nothing, got them in mines where they were getting crushed, got them in plants where they were being lit on fire, no working conditions, no safety, children, 8, 9. Wait, J.P. Morgan, okay? He's doing all this and he knows he's doing it.
Yeah, but he's not putting people in ovens and gas chambers.
Okay, he's not putting people in ovens. So what? He's evil. And then Rockefeller shows up. Rockefeller goes, you know, we're going to need all this oil. Got to light these lamps. And here's what I'm going to do to make more money. Rockefeller Center right down the street. I'm going to not ship oil to certain parts of the country in the winter so the people can't heat their homes. And I'll do that for a month or two. Let them be chilly. And I'll jack the price up 5 times more than it used to be. Hey, these guys were the worst.
Okay, so we shouldn't have statues for Nathan Bedford Forrest, founder of the Ku Klux Klan. Should we have Rockefeller Center?
Remember, all of these robber barons gave enormous amount of money to charity. Carnegie Mellon, Vanderbilt.
Were they trying to buy redemption?
Exactly. They tried to buy their way into heaven.
Is there not a similarity to Jeff Bezos on his yacht and his $50 million wedding while there are slaves literally in China making all the stuff that Amazon sells?
You have to stretch it there. But it's the same as the robber barons because a handful of guys knew the country was changing again in the 1990s. They knew high tech was coming. And they made billions and billions of dollars. But I haven't seen the evil level. They're not nearly in the category of the robber barons.
Up next, we've seen the faces of evil, but what can be done to stop it? The worst evildoers of the past may be dead, but as we've seen, their legacies live on today, both overseas and right here at home, and the threat is very real. There is the saying, the only thing that is necessary for evil to triumph is good men to do nothing.
Right.
But how is it we haven't figured that out, that you have to confront evil at the beginning?
Because it's easier to look away. Most human beings take the easy path. You know, there's very few George Washingtons. There's very few George Pattons. They're extraordinary human beings. Most of us are weak.
Do you have any faith, any hope left?
Yeah, oh yeah. I think that the good always outweighs the bad in the sense that the United States, most powerful nation in the world, why? Because we're essentially a noble nation, that's why. And all the evil nations have gone down. And most of them are destroyed. Now we're dealing with China, we're dealing with Putin, but I don't expect that they will ever rise to where we are. So I think the good people outnumber the bad people.
You've attacked this idea of moral relativism. That somehow not only do the evil men justify evil, but a lot of people justify looking away from evil.
Sure, they have valid excuses. I mean, if you're living on the south side of Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. And you're an honest, hardworking person, and every day you walk out to the street and you see guys with guns selling fentanyl and heroin, doing horrible things, and you say, if I report them, I could be killed. That's a pretty good excuse. But then you go into a system now in America where the left doesn't want to punish criminals. How do we get there? How insane is that? That alone is evil. We live in a system now in America where the progressive left does not want to punish criminals because they feel it's society's fault that these people do heinous things. That is evil because the criminal will then go out and hurt more people.
And the right in America, MAGA in America, the American First Movement in America says, let Putin have Ukraine. We don't care. It's not our problem.
Very small minority. The polling indicates that most Americans understand Putin is evil and they want Ukraine to stop, and they aren't objecting to us sending vast amounts of money to help Ukraine.
Standing for good isn't enough, right? You have to stand up to evil. If America doesn't do it, nobody else is.
Nobody else will. And that's why people, when they badmouth America, can never understand it. Because we alone have freed billions of people. The Cold War was won by us. But look, we could become a totalitarian society if the education system continues to decline and the selfishness of our society continues to rise. Those are the two elements you would need.
So we end tonight with a message of hope and a warning. It's up to us, in ways both big and small, to make sure evil never takes over America, to embrace what Abraham Lincoln called the better angels of our nature. We each decide for ourselves how to do the right thing. But make no mistake, doing nothing is never an option. Thanks so much for watching. For all of us here at NewsNation, I'm Leland Vittert. Good night.